Yes, sir.
Will you actually prosecute this case individually yourself? And second, have you learned anything about the way Inside Washington works that surprises you through this investigation?
The latter, yes. And the former, yes and no. I will be involved in the prosecution, but if you meant individually, will I personally participate? Yes. If you meant individually, I haven't done this individually. I have a great team from D.C., Maine Justice, FBI, and Chicago, and it'll be a team effort.
Yes, if during the course of the public trial information comes out with regard to other people who have leaked, the source of the leak, or other people who exposed Ms. Plave's identity, would this then reverberate back to you since you had been studying this if new information is forthcoming during the course of the trial?
If I can answer your question with a bucket of cold water and say, let's not read too much into it, any new information that would ever come to light while the investigation is open would be handled by our investigative team concerning these facts. So if there's anything that we haven't learned yet that we learn that should be addressed, we will address it. But I don't want to create any great expectations out there by giving sort of a general answer. Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, you touched on this earlier. With the grand jury's time being done, you have no plans to impanel another grand jury related to this case at all. Is that correct?
No, I think what I said is we could use any other grand jury or avail of another grand jury. We couldn't use the grand jurors whose service expired today any further. Yes, sir.
Mr. Fitzgerald, can you clarify for us, this is not just the word of 3 reporters versus the Vice President's Chief of Staff? And I ask that in the sense of how it may be difficult to proceed at trial with memories about something that happened long ago.
And I can't comment on the trial evidence, and I won't tell you the witnesses, but I can't. Sorry. The rules are you don't discuss criminal.
But I guess to put it another way, why are you confident that this is the right thing to do, given that you're dealing with memories of people from something long ago?
And what I can tell you is a prosecutor is allowed to lay out the charges, and a prosecutor is not allowed to vouch for the charges. And what I'll say is we're comfortable proceeding, but you're right. Let's go to a trial. Let's reserve judgment. And our burden is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. By indicting him, we're committing to doing that, but he is presumed innocent, and let's let the process play out. Yes?
Could you explain in general terms why a subject or witness would be given multiple opportunities to come back before the grand jury? Are there times that you give them the opportunity to set the record straight?
And I don't want to answer that in this context because I think people will read too much into it. So I'm not going to give a hypothetical answer to something where I think your questions are based upon beliefs that are not hypothetical. Sorry. I don't want to comment on generally what happens in grand jury investigations when you're here after we've just returned an indictment from a particular grand jury investigation. There's no way that people would read my answer as other than commenting on this grand jury investigation. That's what I'm trying to say.
At the last minute that you would allow a defense lawyer to come in and see you one more time and to make a case. It was very curious at the last minute. There was considerable FBI activity. Wilson's neighbors were interviewed. Witnesses were contacted at the last minute. What are we supposed to read into that? You were just buttoning up your case, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. There was a considerable flurry of activity. Excuse me, that was of great interest.
I think, with all respect, I think someone interviewed the person who shined my shoes the other day. I think we've been doing lots of interest, but if suddenly you put a camera on everyone working on the case and follow them when they have coffee and have lunch, anything we do in the ordinary course of business looks like a flurry of activity. There was a flurry of attention. I won't go beyond that. Look, people, when we investigate things, we're always going out and doing things, and I'm not going to do a timeline. We obviously wanted to get as much done before October 28th as we could. I would have loved to have finished the case completely by October 28th. This grand jury served long and hard and was very, very attentive. We're grateful for their service. So I wanted to get as much accomplished before October 28th, but I wouldn't read anything beyond that. I'm not going to comment on any discussions we have with any counsel. Yes, sir.
A lot of Americans, people who are opposed to the war, critics of the administration, have looked to your investigation with hope in some ways and might see this indictment as a vindication of their argument that the administration took the country to war on false premises. Does this indictment do that?
This indictment is not about the war. This indictment is not about the propriety of the war. And people who believe fervently in the war effort, people who oppose it, people who have mixed feelings about it, should not look to this indictment for any resolution of how they feel or any vindication of how they feel. This is simply an indictment that says in a national security investigation about the compromise of a CIA officer's identity that may have taken place in the context of a very heated debate over the war, whether a person, Mr. Libby, lied or not. The indictment will not seek to prove that the war was justified or unjustified. This is stripped of that debate, and this is focused on a narrow transaction. And I think anyone who's concerned about the war and has feelings for or against shouldn't look to this criminal process for any answers or resolution of that. They will be frustrated, and frankly, it wouldn't be good for the process and the fairness of a trial.
Yes, sir. Have you sought any expansion of your authority since February of 2004, or any clarifications?
No, I think I do know there was a letter, and I haven't looked back. There was a clarified letter. Yes, I think there were 2 letters in early 2004, and that's it. There's nothing changed since then.
Further issues that you want to look into or anything like that?
I'm not looking to expand my authority or mandate, and haven't. I think the second letter is a clarification of the first. Nothing has changed since February 2004 at all.
There's a saying in Washington that it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. Can you tell us whether, if Mr. Libby had testified truthfully, would he be being charged with a crime today? Also, have you decided whether or not to charge official A? And also, it's a little hazy, I think, to many of us. You say that Valerie Plame's identity was classified, but you're making no statement as to whether she was covert. Was leaking her identity of and in itself a crime?
Okay, I think you have 3 questions here. I'm trying to remember them in order. I'll go backwards. And all I'll say is that if national defense information, which is involved because her affiliation with the CIA, whether or not she was covert, was classified, if that was intentionally transmitted, that would violate a statute known as Section 793, which is the Espionage Act. That is a difficult statute to interpret. It's a statute you ought to carefully apply. There are I think there are people out there who would argue that you would never use that to prosecute the transmission of classified information because they think that would convert that statute into what is in England, the Official Secrets Act. Let me back up. The average American may not appreciate that there's no law that specifically just says if you give classified information to somebody else, it is a crime. There may be an Official Secrets Act in England. There are some narrow statutes, and there's this one statute that has some flexibility in it. So there are people who should argue that you should never use that statute because it would become like the Official Secrets Act. I don't buy that theory, but I do know you should be very careful in applying that law because there are a lot of interests that could be implicated in making sure that you pick the right case to charge that statute. That actually feeds into the other question. When you decide whether or not to charge someone with a crime, you want to know as many facts as possible. You want to know what their motive is. You want to know their state of knowledge. You want to know their intent. You want to know the facts. Let's not presume that Mr. Libby's guilty, but let's assume for the moment that the allegations in the indictment are true. If that is true, you cannot figure out the right judgment to make, whether or not you should charge someone with a serious national security crime or walk away from it or recommend any other course of action if you don't know the truth. So I understand your question, which is, well, what if he had told the truth? What would you have done? Well, if he had told the truth, we would have made the judgment based upon those facts. We would have assessed what the accurate information is and made a decision. We have not charged him with a crime. I'm not making an allegation that he violated that statute. What I'm simply saying is one of the harms in obstruction is that you don't have a clear view of what should be done, and that's why when people are going to walk in, you're going to go into the grand jury, you're going to take an oath, tell us the who, what, when, where, and why straight, and our commitment on the other end is to use our judgment as to what we prosecute, and if we don't prosecute, to keep quiet. And we're simply saying in here we didn't get the straight story, and we had to take action. Yes, sir.
Can you just...
Whether or not you had decided, made a definitive decision on
And I
whether
refer
to
you to
charge.
Mr. Isikoff, who took great notes on his question about people not charged, which I cannot answer.